Welcome back, everyone. It's Wednesday, November 6th, 2013. This is GGN. I'm Darko. My website is ggnonline.net. On YouTube, ddarko2012, ddarko2013. If you'd like to get updates, or if you'd like to donate too, I do accept donations, and they're very much appreciated. Okay, so I'm going to cover the Middle East, Syria, some Iran news, China, Russia news, and drug running by governments and mafias or mobs. President Assad stresses the need for uniting efforts of the Arab forces. He met in a delegation that compromises Algerian political, media, and economic figures. During the meeting, he affirmed that the Algerian people's support for Syria is not unusual for this people, particularly since they have very similar experience to what the Syrians are experiencing now in confronting terrorism. So, he says that the Syrians and the Algerian people share an honorable history of confronting colonialism. So he would say basically that he affirmed the need for uniting the efforts of Arab elite figures and nationalists to create an intellectual deterrent capable of protecting pan-Arabism and nationalism and confronting changes and foreign and security plots targeting Arabs present and future. So it says here that the Algerians basically supported the steadfastness of the Syrian army and the people in the face of terrorism and plots of sedition and division which are backed by regional and international sides, stressing that these projects target all Arabs, not just Syrians. They also voice confidence that Syria, the symbol of resistance and the first defender of Arab causes and interests, will be victorious. An exclusive, this is from Foreign Policy, so Assad asked the UN to equip his troops and give him armored trucks. They presented the United Nations, the chemical weapons watchdog, with a detailed plan to transfer the materials abroad for destruction. It's not actually set in stone. They're trying to see where they're going to dump it. Norway refused. Lebanon refused. I've heard Albania. So according to this account of the plan reviewed by Foreign Policy, includes 120 security forces, dozens of heavy armored trucks, and advanced communications network linking Damascus to the Mediterranean Sea. The Syrian plan calls for equipping at least 8 platoons of up to 35 soldiers each to secure the road between Damascus to the port city of Latakia, from which the weapons would be shipped overseas for destruction. Look at that. Here it is again. The most likely destination, Albania, which got rid of its own stockpile in 2007. It says here that this request triggered expressions of alarm from Western diplomats, so they'll be looking at very skeptical. It's like, yeah, how about you try going through these roads to Syria and see how fast you make it without getting bombed. The only people that are allowing those roads to be traveled, I wouldn't even say freely, are the Syrian government forces that have given a lot of energy and blood to clear those roads of terrorists. And every time they clear them and they're going to another part of Syria, they have to go back and, quote, cleanse them again. And these are the same terrorists that these frantic or these concerned Western diplomats are arming. Again, you have here these people were going in to help these people that were being held hostage in these cities by these terrorists, these Salafists. Red Crescent loses 31 volunteers during Syria's deadly conflict. So we just covered this earlier this week on Monday, and 31 have died, lost their lives during the country's long lingering conflict. They declared this, though it's not all in one day. That's what I thought it was, but it says here in a statement, the last staffer was killed a day earlier while transporting an injured person from the countryside. So they're gunning down with snipers someone who's rescuing an injured person. It says that they were driving an ambulance that holds the emblem, basically, and they shoot pregnant women and bet on it for packs of cigarettes too. So it's pretty interesting. So remember we were talking about Iranian guards defending against terrorists on the border. There's actually shootouts, some of them killed. Then we had this in Syria, November 5th. Iran, I don't think it happened on the 5th. Iran buries guard, a Revolutionary Guard commander that was killed in Syria. The funeral was held in southeastern Iran for the commander who was reportedly killed by rebel forces in Syria. So, and then you have this unknown gunman kills Iran prosecutor. So, opened fire on a car of the public prosecutor in Iran's southeastern province, killing him along with the driver. So, yeah, Iran does have an invested interest to make sure that Syria is secure because the same thing will happen to them. I mean, I don't see an all-out airstrike by Zionist Israel in the U.S. The U.S., they're probably telling Israel to calm down. You don't need to strike them with missiles. We don't roll like that anymore. We just back terrorists and create destabilization campaigns, and that's most likely what they'll do to Iran. And of course, they use the economy. The economy is a magnificent tool. It's way more efficient than troops on the ground waving flags and stuff like that. To wage an economic war is just about as effective, probably, as weather wars using weather modification and satellite transmissions, hard type stuff for psychological operations against people. Because with all of them, you don't know who the culprit is. You can never really point your finger to the main perpetrators. Iran burning $7 billion to lead the world's gas club. So we talked about U.S. becoming the largest oil and natural gas exporter, passing Putin and Russia and Gazprom. They'll lead the club of the world's biggest natural gas exporter as its own shipments abroad are hampered by U.S. and European Union sanctions that force the country to burn off billions of dollars worth of fuel. U.S. and EU sanctions over their nuclear program have cut the Persian nation's crude exports, its largest revenue source, by half since 2011. So that's what it could be all about, They just use that nuclear issue. And people believe that, too. That's the sad thing. Especially people on the right, dude, like Fox News watchers. They actually believe that bullshit, dude, about Iran being a nuclear threat, dude. Or North Korea or something like that. It says here that they're the net importers, the three GECF members. That's what Iran is. They're one of the net importers as the group faces increased competition from liquefied natural gas projects, from the U.S. to Australia. I'm sure even Russia. So it says here the vote is a signal that attitudes towards Iran perhaps are thawing and tensions easing since they were elected to represent this group on the international stage, says the Dubai managing director for this resource company. I mentioned this too before about how the recent easing up on Iran has nothing to do with them believing that they weren't a nuclear threat. It had to do with the Western Zionist-controlled U.S., Canada, UK, and EU were shoring up assets or liquefying assets and that for money. And, I guess they consider easing up sanctions against Iran as another form of an asset by freeing up cash. And then Syria, besides creating massive amounts of refugees that go into non-Arab, non-Middle Eastern nations, into Europe and into America and that, they are also wanting to lay pipelines. That's why Saudi Arabia, or mostly Qatar, are backing the terrorists, the actual cash in that. But the U.S. and them, they supply the kind of special forces, reconnaissance, some CIA guys on the ground. U.S. spies on... and the propaganda. Let's not forget that. Propaganda war. Supporting them. U.S. spies on Venezuela for resources, says their minister. He says we have enormous national wealth, and any country or empire that unquestionably sees its oil reserves dwindling and its energy-producing capacities gradually decreasing is going to see Venezuela undoubtedly as a tempting place to control. He continued to say that the U.S. National Security Agency, the NSA, has been spying on them. Quote, we are preventing them, the U.S., from generating a lot of energy with little money and maintaining their untouchable way of life at the expense of Venezuelan labor and natural wealth. A leak reveals a plot to destabilize Venezuelan government. This is from today from the 6th. The leaked documents revealed. A plot to destabilize Venezuela and undermine the rule of the leftist president Nicolas Maduro. The papers appear to substantiate Caracas' claims of outside attempts to cripple the country through internal sabotage. They were obtained by RT's Spanish channel. The plans are allegedly the product of a conference between an American company, FTI Consulting, and two right-wing Colombian groups affiliated with former President Uribe. Speaking of Colombia, Colombia's president complains that two Russian bombers violated his country's airspace. Well, Israel violates Lebanese airspace, I think, on a daily basis. They also carried out airstrikes against Syria, and nobody said a damn thing. So Colombia's president says his government is sending a protest note to Russia over the violation of his country's airspace by two long-range bombers on a flight from Venezuela to Nicaragua. Russia says that on the 28th, these supersonic bombers had flown to Venezuela as part of a military exercise. The planes are capable of carrying nuclear missiles. This is off coming past this story from October 24th. China retaliates against U.S. naval presence in the East Asia Sea with ships in Hawaiian waters. So they're feeling confident about a naval buildup by showing their presence. It's a recon ship, see all the satellites and that. Coordinated IED blast strikes outside China's Communist Party, their provincial headquarters. One person killed, 8 wounded after a series of improvised devices exploded outside an office building of a provincial headquarters of the Communist Party. So, and this comes after some other stuff has happened. Chinese police say Tiananmen Square crash was premeditated violent terrorist attacks. What's going on here? Terrorist attacks in China? Chinese authorities declared Wednesday that the Fury vehicle crash at Tiananmen Square this week was a deliberate terrorist attack. Said 5 men have been arrested for allegedly helping the plan. Remember Russia, like I said, I have to reiterate this, after they helped with the talks with Syria, chemical weapons to give them up, and it supposedly warded off airstrikes, although I don't think that's really true. They couldn't have done it with the weapons there, but I think they will strike them after they remove the weapons. But that's not my point. My point is just that after that, Russia, all of a sudden, Dagestan and the Caucasus were just lit up with terrorist attacks in a row, and now you're seeing this now in China. North Korea's back in the news again. They were just talking about EMP devices being able to hit the U.S. and being aided by Russia. Like I said, that's they're just putting that out there like they have been to blame it on them in case they want to shut down the grid here at home. It says U.S. ready for North Korea's missile capable of hitting America. The U.S. Pacific Com says the U.S. is prepared to counter intercontinental ballistic missiles that can hit his country. Whether they're real or not, or whether they have the capability or not, North Korean regime wants us to think that they do, so we will plan for that. They probably never even said it. It was probably completely made up so that they can warrant a build-up against a premeditated offensive strike. What better excuse than to say, oh, they shut down our grid with an EMP. Russia's going to deploy more ballistic missiles by the year's end. They want to preserve. It says the missile shield in Central Eastern Europe became a reality. The work started at the former air base in southern Romania on the 28th of October, installing elements of the U.S. missile defense system, particularly the Aegis System SM-3 interceptors, and means that the missile defense project is being implemented on schedule. It confirms close, fast-growing military cooperation between Romania and the U.S. And it says that Bucharest is one of Washington's main security partners, not just in the region, but increasingly on the European scale. And while John Kerry is going around to Egypt and all these other countries trying to reassure him that they're still relevant to the U.S., he's also going to Poland probably to push, again, a Patriot-type missile system. Russian army is going to improve the quality of their combat training. They said that's the reason why they've been having all these SNAP exercises. They've held 6 surprise inspections of combat readiness and most of the 750 planned Army-level exercises since the beginning of this year. In late October, they involved launches of ballistic missiles and drills by air defense and missile defense units to assess the combat readiness of the Russians' nuclear deterrent. You probably remember this one in July was the largest in the post-Soviet period, involved some 160,000 servicemen, 1,000 tanks, 130 aircraft, 70 warships. The EU and NATO basically just had an exercise right on Russia's doorstep. Russia just had their own nuclear exercise. So this EU should create their own spy agency. Well, they want their own army. It would act as a rival to the NATO on strategic defense issues. A German think tank says they want to consolidate Europe's national defense industries. This propaganda piece from the Washington Post: as U.S. withdraws from Afghanistan, the poppy trade it spent billions fighting still flourishes. I thought we were going there for Osama bin Laden. The truth is, they were protecting the Afghan opium fields, bribing the Taliban. Yeah, heroin production is up 185 tons a year to 5,800. Russian cops just seized $46 million worth of Afghan heroin. An Italian mob illegally dumped nuclear waste in Italy. The Japanese mafia feared in control of labor at the Fukushima nuclear cleanup. Thank you.